All right. So welcome back. Hello, everyone. So today I'm actually going to talk to you a little bit about something that I feel like James Clear didn't emphasize enough in his book, Atomic Habits. Now, Atomic Habits is like a Bible for me right now. I've been reading the first two chapters, especially repeatedly over the past few months. And I highly recommend the book, but more specifically, if you can get your hands on just the first two chapters of that book, that's like well worth the $20-$30 of the book. It's that powerful. But one thing that struck me as I started to reread it is this notion of atomic habits being building blocks to remarkable results. If I'm not mistaken, even bear with me, I know I'm taking on a consume journey here, but if I look up Atomic Habits, if I'm not mistaken, so I thought he had a subtitle where he says atomic habits are the birthplace of remarkable results. So that might just be more of the quote that I'm about to share with you. But one thing that he emphasizes, especially in his titles and everywhere else, is that habits are the building blocks of everything, right? Habits are the building blocks of ultimate, great results. Habits are the building blocks of great identities. And to some extent, that's true. But there's a little bit of a contradiction in his work, which I feel like, I don't know why he hasn't realized it. Because on the one hand, he talks about how habits form everything, right? They form the habits form your identity via like repetition, and your habits form your results ultimately via multiplied consequences over time. But on the other hand, he talks about how even if you have good habits or systems in place, if your identity is conflicting with that, then you're going to have a problem, because your identity or your self-image is going to sabotage whatever habits you have. So it's like, okay, how can habits be the source of your identity if your identity can sabotage your habits, right? So for me, I'm just going to read to you guys a little bit from his work, and then I'm going to talk about what this means in terms of this analogy of building blocks. So let's start off with the quote that maybe a lot of people are more familiar with, which is kind of the one that he talks about in chapter 1. So, habits are the atoms of our lives. Each one is a fundamental unit that contributes to our overall improvement. And at first, these tiny routines seem insignificant, but soon they build on each other and fuel bigger wins that multiply to a degree that far outweighs the cost of their initial investment. They are both small and mighty. This is the meaning of the phrase atomic habits, a regular practice or routine that is not only small and easy to do, but also the source of incredible power and component of a system of compound growth. So, and this is kind of important because he's basically, he's basically building on this analogy of how atoms can build up into structures. So if you don't know, atoms, at least according to the materialistic worldview of most scientists, atoms are really everything, right? I mean, for all intents and purposes, atoms build everything, right? So just to read this quote from this like kids website, because I'm not I'm not a scientist, so I needed a kids breakdown, But atoms are the basis for everything in the universe, right? Matter is composed of atoms. Solids are made of densely packed atoms, while gases have atoms that are spread out, right? Living things, biochemistry is all made up of atoms and their reactions to each other and things like that. So just to take a step back, I mean, the phone or the computer that you're watching this on is made of atoms according to this, and then even, like everything is composed of atoms, right? And so James Clear is making this argument that anytime you see a result, like let's say this larger than life overnight success or something crazy like that, if you look closely, much in the same way that if you take a microscope to this laptop and if you just looked closely enough, you'd see all the atoms. In the same way, he's arguing that with the result, any result, if you look closely enough, you'll see some habits that got them there. So, and that's a beautiful analogy. Now, the problem that I fucking have is that basically what I said before, where it's like, okay, you say that, but then you argue that even habits are built out of building blocks. So I'm going to read this second quote, and I'm basically going to make an argument for what I call atomic identities, right? So this is from chapter 2 of his book. There are a set of beliefs and assumptions that shape a system, an identity behind the habits. Behavior that is incongruent with the self will not last. You may want more money, but if your identity is someone who consumes rather than creates, then you will continue to be pulled down towards spending rather than earning. You may want better health, but if you continue to prioritize comfort over accomplishment, you'll be drawn to relaxing rather than training. It is hard to change your habits if you never change the underlying beliefs that led to your past behavior. You have a new goal and a new plan, but you haven't changed who you are. And even in chapter 2, I'm going to paraphrase this, but in chapter 2 even, he talks about how even if you think of like a political system, right? A system composed of many people, not just you. So let's say, for the example, a system a system of democracy, right? Like a voting system. He makes the argument that the only reason that system exists in the world is because many people share the same beliefs about, human agency, free will, the right to, advocate for themselves and things like that. There are many hidden beliefs that allow for that system to exist. And like one thing that he didn't really say, but I guess this is my analogy, is just imagine trying to set up a system of democracy in a terrorist regime. It's just not going to happen, right? It's just not going to happen. Or try setting up democracy or like legitimate democracy in a concentration camp. It's not going to happen because within that system, there are beliefs that conflict with the human agency and the human free will necessary for people to vote freely, right? If you're a slave, you're not going to be allowed to vote all of a sudden, right? So going back to this is the same thing with habits. This is the same thing with systems, that there are beliefs. So he defines it as beliefs, self-image, or mindsets that if you don't have those right, they will sabotage whatever habit goal you have, right? This is why people with New Year's resolutions fail all the time, because their beliefs about themselves haven't changed. And so what I would claim, therefore, is that atomic identities are the building blocks of remarkable processes, just as atomic processes or habits are the building blocks of remarkable results. Now, what does that mean? Well, for me, you're actually looking at, this is my Tiny Wins doc, actually. So this is what I use on a daily basis. I always remind myself that the highest priority in any situation is to improve my identity, right? And more specifically, he defines it very clearly. What it means to improve your identity is improve your beliefs, improve your mindsets. I've added mental models because I feel like that's a good, I think it's similar to mindsets, but it means something different. Like a mental model is a framework by which you interpret things. Like, so for example, there's a mental model of the 80-20 principle, right? So 80% of your results come from 20% of your inputs. And if you use that mental model, then you're able to make better decisions and maybe even make better decisions about your time, about yourself, right? So things like that. And then self-image, of course. And so for me, that's the highest priority. Now, James Clear glosses over that, where he says in chapter 2, okay, identity-based habits are more important. And he even says, hey, you should decide the type of person that you want to be and then prove it with tiny wins. I completely agree with that. I endorse that. But I think James Clear then goes on and just talks about habits for the rest of the book. And I'm like, okay, that's nice, but shouldn't we also take some time and decide what are the best mindsets, what are the best identities to have? And he didn't really have any comment on that. And so I'm gonna stop here. This might be first part of, maybe I might put another part out. I'll decide that. But one thing I guess I would say is that one thing that needs to be done, right? And maybe I'm the one that's going to be doing it, is there needs to be a conversation about what are the best identities, right? So in the same way with habits and processes, James Clear will have a book on that. But what about, okay, what are the best mindsets, right? So for example, one easy mindset that I think is best is growth mindset, right? The belief that you can improve at any endeavor that you put effort into and that you get feedback from, right? So it's like, as opposed to you thinking, oh, woe is me, I'm not good at this, which I hear a lot of people doing. Maybe you should switch that shit out for growth mindset. Have you thought of that? That's a fucking concept, right? But I think that's a conversation that needs to be had. Like, what is the hierarchy? What are better and worse identities to have? What are better and worse beliefs to have, and so on? And then from there, we can have maybe a more coherent conversation about what habits to take, because again, those habits are based on the beliefs. So anyway, that's my little rant / commentary. Hopefully this makes sense. This is something that I am very interested in, but I'm still learning, especially when it comes to identity. It's new for me to try and attack identity directly. So I'm not going to pretend like I'm the best at it, but I am trying that. So if you have any comments, any suggestions or anything like that, feel free to leave it in the comments. I'm going to queue this up. So, by the time you watch this, I might have something else out, or something else ready in the queue. But regardless, I love your comments. I'm willing to answer any questions. And then finally, I do have a snug. It costs $20, which I know is, it's kind of is what it is, honestly. But, if you want to have a more deep dive conversation, or really just have a conversation about anything you're worried about or struggling with, feel free to set up a time, and I'm happy to help. So other than that, I hope you guys are doing really well. Have a great week, and I will see you guys in a bit. Take care now.